All right, great. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the final community conversation of the 2021-2022 biennium. Wow. I feel like I need to take a breath. I was just talking to someone about when I ran, and I realized that it was May of 2020, and it was like the pandemic had just hit. It's just really wild to think about what has happened in the last 2 years. So it's great to see you guys. It's great to be here. This has been a real pleasure over the last couple of years to connect with you all. This is Community Conversations. I'm Kate Donnally. And what we're going to start by doing is just kind of going around. We'll introduce ourselves. And Rich and Dan, if you want to also just say a little bit about where you guys are at come the end of session, and then we'll open things up for question and answer like we usually do, and then we'll kind of go from there. So Rich, you want to kick us off?
Can Dan do it? I'm sorry, I'm texting someone else.
Dan, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Dan Noyes. Live in Wolcott. Serve in the Lamoille 2 district, and I'm running for re-election. And so I think one of the big things that I'm pretty happy about that passed this session is the Office of the Child Advocate. It's something I've been working on for like 5 years. It's been a legislative bill longer than that, 10 years, maybe more. Mark Redmond was telling me he testified on it in 2010. So I was glad to see the governor sign that on Wednesday. It's basically an advocate who serves within state government, but not as part of DCF, and really tries to look at the systems that how we provide services to youth in the custody of the state, and really looking at big picture, trying to dig down and help the legislature and help DCF make really good decisions about policy-wise. They're set up to be non-adversarial, non-investigative, but just looking at the systemic structures that we have in the state to help youth in the custody of the state transition to adulthood. So I've been pretty excited that passed, and it's something I've been working on for 5 years. So I'll be interested to see through the hiring process and setting up the advisory council over the summer that will help create this position, and seeing it start up sometime in January. So, I think that's kind of one of my biggest things this year. We did pretty good on home and community-based service providers in terms of rate increase. These are home health and adult days. Thanks to the Senate appropriations for kind of going the extra mile on that one, based on what the House recommended. So I think that was really good. That's something that, and then we put some money, some language in the budget around a rate study to really look at what it costs to deliver these services. That's something Rep. Wood from Waterbury and I have been working on for a number of years to really try to dig down and find out, where the shortcomings are and how we make sure that, our support services are not super fragile. I mean, we lost 3 adult days during COVID because the way the payments are set up, if you don't show up, they don't get paid, but they still have to pay for heat and lights. And, so really trying to figure out a better way to fund these agencies so that they're available for older Vermonters. So I'll just leave it at that, and always happy to answer questions. Senator?
Thanks, Dan. Rich, you ready, or you need another minute?
I gotta say, at least we won't have to listen to Dan advocate for his child advocate bill anymore. I think it was every day for the last 5 years you've lobbied people like me. So,
good job, Dan. It worked. Congratulations. That's a big win.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for standing up for the people.
So, my last 2 weeks of the session were pretty full. I was on the conference committee on the budget where Dan talked about I think the total amount was between 40 and $50 million that went into what we call our designated agencies. Some of the higher profile designated agencies in our county would be Lamoille Home Health and the Mental Health Agency. The House had passed the governor had recommended a 3% increase. The House passed a 7%. The Senate passed an 8%, and we ended up at an 8% increase across the board, which, because the designated agency clearly provide a lot of services that are very important services to the state, but they aren't state employees. It's not a negotiated contract. So they sometimes have been left behind. So this was a big move to get them a pretty healthy increase this year. So the budget had lots of things in it. One of the things I've heard the most about is there's $95 million to move broadband along in the one-time funds. Happy to connect anybody to summaries of what's in the budget if you would like that. The other conference committee I was on in the at the end of the session was the tax credit, where there is a significant tax credit, a child care tax credit that isn't quite as rich as what the House had originally passed. We chose in the Senate to put some other things in, like child care and dependent tax credit, which affects both people with children and adults that have elderly parents that are that they're taking care of, which is quite a huge issue. And so there were a number of pieces to that. The Senate bill also included a tax credit for people paying off student loans. And that made it through the process. And so we worked that out in the conference committee. I helped craft the last pieces of that tax credit piece and I and in the middle of that did a bunch of this all on Zoom because I finally got COVID, and so did a bunch of all this work in the middle of having COVID. And so if there's any specific questions about things, I'm happy to answer them. I could spend a very long time talking about an $8.5 billion budget, but you know, I'm quite pleased. There's a number of other bills that I think this was the best year I've ever had. I introduced 8 bills, and 7 of them either in some form, the contents of those bills either ended up someplace else or in that or passed themselves, which I think for me was a record of getting issues through. Everything from the miscellaneous liquor bill had a redefinition of cider, which will be very beneficial to like Stowe cider and a group of those. Everything from there to stuff about land appraisal and condominiums to a whole host of things this year. So, but I'm happy if anybody wants details on stuff like the budget to get summaries out to people.
Thank you very much. And for anyone who's not super familiar with the legislative process, as I would have counted myself 2 years ago, getting 7 out of 8 of your bills to move in some capacity is like a pretty remarkable thing that most legislators will never experience in their lifetime. Big shout
thank
out
you,
to
Kate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just say
need to name that.
when usually there's 1,400 bills introduced in a biennium, a 2-year period, and we usually act on 140 of them, I'm feeling pretty lucky.
Yeah, well, clearly more than just luck. And also huge props to Dan. I think getting the Office of Child Advocate moved was a Herculean effort. So it's an honor to serve with you guys, honestly. Yeah, so I think for me, as folks may know, I serve on the Judiciary Committee. And as I've said on this meeting before, this year, I think our work in the Judiciary Committee in the House really kicked off with a presentation from the Council of State Governments who the Vermont government had worked with to put together a study to put some actual numbers behind what is happening in our criminal legal system as it pertains to certain points of interaction, and looking at specifically racial disparities between Black and white Vermonters. We have not had the capacity to gather actual data in this area, and so we had partnered with CSG, who does this work across the country, and we kicked off this year with a presentation from them, which really clearly outlined that there are very real racial disparities in their criminal legal system, and helped, from a policy perspective, outline sort of some of the points in the system where this is most significant. One of the areas that was highlighted is in felony charges, and specifically drug-related felony charges. And so the hope, I think, this year was to really try to make some movement to address these issues. And I will say that we had mixed results. I don't know if folks read the most recent News and Citizen. There was an op-ed by a Falco Schilling who, actually, I'm probably going to mess up his role, but he's sort of the lead policy person at the ACLU in Vermont, and basically said as much, that we had really mixed results this year in terms of criminal legal reform in Vermont, and there was a lot of disappointment, frankly, among a lot of advocates. Specifically, a couple areas that we've been really actively working on are expungement. There's a boatload of data to suggest that after a certain window of time, if someone does not reoffend, that their risk of reoffense goes down to the rate of the actual just general population. And yet the effect of having a criminal record is massively prohibitive for people in terms of income, access to housing, access to employment, volunteering at their kids' elementary school. So access to community, access to connection. And unfortunately, we worked really hard with the administration to try to craft balanced legislation to address this. And ultimately, what we passed was vetoed by the governor. And the other veto that was really disappointing was Policy 505, which was designed to directly address the drug offenses. And within that, it got so stripped down that essentially at the end, it was the creation of an advisory council that was just tasked with looking at personal use amounts. One of the things that I think everyone's in agreement around is that we would like to not be spending our resources criminalizing people who are using substances. We would like to be using our resources looking at people who are trafficking substances, if anything. And this would be an important step in helping us delineate what does it mean to, what does personal use mean? How do we distinguish between someone who is just using substances in their daily life and someone who is trafficking substances? And that also was vetoed by the governor. So I think there's a lot of work to do to get, I think, everyone on board around what this looks like and how we address it. What we know is we have a problem. and we are struggling to find a path forward to address that problem. One of the things that I think did pass, although I haven't looked at the most recent bill signage by the governor, I'm hoping that it's signed, is 546, which created Bureau of Racial Justice Statistics. And so this is basically an entity that would fall under the Office of Equity, and it would allow us to do what CSG did for us, which is to really start getting actual data to look at what is happening in our criminal legal system and as it pertains to disparities and discrepancies and how people are being treated within the criminal legal system. I think I'll pause there because I feel like I've been talking for a long time. And we can open things up for some general Q&A. Does anyone have, I know this sort of dropped out there, so I'll just wait a minute. If anyone has any questions at the top of their mind, what we usually do is if you can raise your little virtual hand, and I can call on folks in whatever order. Susan, did you have a question?
I do, but I don't, how do I raise my virtual hand?
You're fine. It's fine. It's fine. We'll make the exception. You audibly let us know that you have a question. Go ahead. What's your question?
It is, I just want to respond to all of the things that you said, which are all wonderful. And I was madly taking notes so I can share this. But at the top of my mind at the moment is knowing that every time there's a shooting in this country, people who manufacture and sell arms profit greatly because of the reaction of people who are afraid that the government's going to take their guns away. So there's a lot of sales. It's so hard to feel so helpless. But one thing that occurred to me is that if our state retirement systems have any investment in any of those firms, and some of them are they're not obvious. There's companies that I buy Camelback hiking stuff, but that same company also produces Remington arms. So that's the sort of stuff that I have no knowledge about, but I'm just wondering if there's any way to bring that up so that we can have that discussion at the state level for our state retirement system.
Rich, do you feel comfortable fielding this question just since you're most or intimately involved with or not? Or Dan, I see your hand.
I mean, I've looked at how the pension money is invested, and there's a pension investment board that makes these decisions. Because I've had a number of emails and constituents concerned about investing in carbon, so oil production. And it's not something that the legislature really tells them what they should and should not invest in. They have this board that makes these decisions, and they have public meetings and take public input. And that would be a really good place to start if you were concerned about that.
How do we do that? I mean, does it help at all to contact our local legislators and say this is what we feel? And I know you said you don't advise on that, but what does the average citizen who feels a need to do something
I think the first place the average citizen should go if that they're interested in it is send something to the state treasurer, because it is the treasurer's office that does the investing, and whether it is gun or whether it's the oil companies or any of that, it's usually the policy from the treasurer's office that deals with that, and they generally oppose blanketly any restriction on where they're supposed to invest in that. But that said, sometimes they do set policies within that, but it's very hard for the legislature to get involved in that sort of thing. Because it's quite a complicated world, but it is the treasurer that is the place to contact.
Okay.
And it just so happens we're going to be electing a new treasurer. So you're going to be hearing from candidates that want that position.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So Beth Pierce is not running for re-election. So there's a bunch of people that are putting their name in for that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add, Susan, that if there's ever anything policy related that feels really important to you, or any people that you're connected to in the community, I would say always put it in our inbox. And I don't know if everyone would agree with, and that doesn't mean I can always get back to you, and it doesn't mean that there's anything I can necessarily concretely do, and I'm, legislatively in terms of bill movement, but
you could teach us.
Hearing from the community about what's important to you is very helpful for me, as I'm, we do interact with the treasurer around other issues. We do interact with people, and I think it's always helpful to know where the community stands on these issues.
And you could direct us, because I wouldn't have known that. So, I mean, that's helpful. Thank you.
Totally.
And it looks like they are meeting on June 28th for that, the Pension Investment Board. They have a web page under Office of the Treasurer. So if you can, it's pretty easy to find on their page, and it's got all their contact information. So it's also a good place to work with, but we're going to have a new treasurer. So.
Okay. So that's really good to know too. So that's actually, that's helpful. So I thank you all for all that.
And this is not specifically on this issue, but I think one of the big things that was included in the budget in it is we took some significant steps to deal with the underfunding of both the state employees and the teachers' pensions. But, we have about a $5 to $5.5 billion hole, and what we filled was a little more than half of that. Some of that was done with increased contributions by state employees and teachers. Some of that was done by limiting benefits. Some of that was done with us prepaying a bunch of contributions into that. A piece of that is done with trying now to turn the retired teachers' healthcare into a prepaid system. So as we talk about any structure in limiting what the state can invest in, that's why it's really hard for the legislature to get involved in, because the whole picture that's looked at there is usually looked at by the treasurer's office and the investment committees that go with that. Not that the legislature, ultimately doesn't have a role to play in the funding, but we took a big step at reducing that unfunded liability this year. And since you talk about that, I thought it important to say that we dropped that by $2.5 to $3 billion, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, I did read that. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you. Is it Andrea or Andrea? I don't know why I can't.
That's okay. Andrea,
thank you.
Yes.
Andrea,
Yeah.
I see your hand up. What's your question?
Yeah.
Or comment?
Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you, Rich, for working even through COVID, through getting COVID, and congratulations. Now you have natural immunity. So yay,
Well,
you made it through.
But it's really hard doing a conference committee with 6 people trying to negotiate both budget and a tax bill and be on Zoom. It's way easier to deal with people in person.
You can at least be in PJs from the bottom down. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for your hard work this session. And I know that, it's hard to balance all of the different people in the community that want to tell you all the things that they believe. And, in the end, as legislators, you have to, make decisions that feel good for you all. I did just want to say that I was sad to see all three of you vote to override the veto of the clean heat bill. I do think it was really good that it didn't pass. I went to school for environmental science. I really believe in lessening our carbon footprint. I also think that that particular bill would have been really harmful for low-income people who just don't have the money to install, heat pumps and solar. And I'm sure all of us would love to have AC for a few weeks a year, but it's a major investment. So I think just being able to look at the impact of bills in the greater picture, but also, how that trickles down to the average person who's really struggling right now. So I do think it's best that we rework that and try to come at it from different angles than more that punitive, level.
So you want to go first, Dan, or do you want me?
Go ahead, Rich, but I would be glad to
first
talk
off,
about
there was no veto override. The governor vetoed the bill, and the legislature is not coming back to try to override the governor's veto. Second, I did support the bill in the end, and that as it passed the Senate. But here's what the position I was in. I voted against the bill when it left Senate Natural Resources, and it was a 4-1 vote. The bill went to appropriations, and what we had heard from most of the people that express opinions like yours is the most important thing for them was to get a check back with the legislature. So if the PUC developed a clean heat standard, that standard, before it got implemented, had to come back to the legislature for a vote. The Senate Appropriations Committee, where the Natural Resources bill in the Senate went to, I sit, my afternoon committee is my morning committee is Natural Resources in the Senate. My afternoon committee is Appropriations, unlike the House where we do. In the Senate Appropriations Committee, we added language to the bill that said the bill could not, it wouldn't implement the clean heat standard without a vote of the legislature, which was one of the governor's main concerns, and those people that I helped craft the language that did that in Senate Appropriations, and we voted 7-0 to do that. My morning committee wanted to fight the Appropriations Committee over that language, and I was able to talk them down off the ledge, and they said no, and we added that language. At that point, I didn't feel that I could vote against the bill after I got significant changes within the bill that I think addressed one of the biggest concerns from groups. I'd like to rework the bill. I'd like to see the issue move ahead. And I think we have to work on the issue and see it move ahead. I think whatever standards we do, if we come up with something next year, whatever we put together as a plan should be voted on by the legislature before it gets implemented. I still would like to see that in there. So there was no veto override. The veto will stand, but I think it important to understand the position that people like me were in. I was the only person in the Senate that sits on both natural resources and appropriations. And I was the key person that could help advocate for that coming back to the legislature. And I voted for the issue. I think it's an important issue. I want to see the issue move ahead, but I don't want to see anything implemented without, when we do a bill, the final plan that comes up, because we will be the first state in the country to develop a clean heat standard and try to implement it. So I think it's important that we understand what we're doing.
Yeah, I did read, I log on to the website often, and I saw all the votes, and I saw who overrided the veto. And luckily there were some reps that did not vote to override the veto, and that's why the veto stood. But helps Rich to hear why you had to vote. Yeah, and it also helps to know the history of why you voted for it, because if you work so hard on a bill and you get everyone to like agree on those amendments, I mean, it just, for posterity, I would think you need to then support the bill.
I tried to make the bill better.
Just to clarify for anyone who's listening, sorry, Dan, 1 second, and then you can, I just want to clarify for folks who are listening who maybe are, so the House did vote on whether or not to override the veto. It did not pass. So the override did not pass. So all the things are true. We did, I did vote to override the veto, and the override did not succeed. Dan, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, I supported it in the veto override because of the check back with the legislature. I thought that was a really good move that the Senate put in there. But to your point that low-income individuals can't afford to put in heat pumps, they also can't afford $8-10 fuel oil if it goes that high. I mean, I just had my tank filled and it was $1,000. And shocking to have it filled up this time of year when I'm not using it and have $1,000 bill to sit on for the whole summer. So I think my point is that we've got to do something. This really asked the Public Utility Commission to come up with a plan on how we're going to make sure that people have the ability to heat their homes in the winter without, reliant on something that is, fluctuates so greatly. A lot of people get the LIHEAP program, the low income heating assistance. And at some point, that federal money is not going to be enough to help older Vermonters and people trying to live in northern climates. So I think we need to develop some sort of a way to be able to provide so that people are not reliant on something that fluctuates so greatly as home heating fuel and propane. And that's why I supported it. We need a plan. If we don't have a plan, we're just going to keep doing the same thing, which is, being at the whim of, oil prices that fluctuate so greatly and that have the potential to go, who knows, right now it's at $6. Could it go to $7? Could it go to $8? Absolutely. And, I know a lot of people that can't afford that. And if they're not using oil, then it doesn't matter what the price is. So we need to find a way so that we're not stuck with that. So I don't know. That's what I got to add. Glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, just from a natural resources perspective, like things that use electricity, something has to generate that electricity. Mm-hmm. So, solar is great, but, as we all know in Vermont, I don't know, I have some panels, but, there are many months that, solar doesn't, give anything. So I think, again, it's like, it's the whole electric car thing. Everyone's like electric cars, solar. It's like, we don't have enough raw minerals on this planet for everyone to have an electric car, for everyone to have solar panels. So it's again, like, kind of that expression of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. I think that we definitely need to focus on alternative, fuel heating sources and support people that can't, automatically afford them through incentives or, rebates and things like that. But I mean, it's tricky. There's so many systems that need support and need money, and yet, we're running at deficits. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I just want to check in. I know Steffi's hand has been up for a minute here, so I just want to check in and see, Steffi, what your question is.
Hi, I just wanted to say thanks. Just as Andrea was doing as well, you guys have done put a lot of time in. You're thoughtful about a lot of the things you're doing. I really kind of wanted to echo, and that was one of my questions. What Andrea had spoken about was the clean heat bill, and I'm not. It's not even low income. It hurts everybody. And Dan, I can appreciate you saying talking about the gas prices and things like that, but with that. It's only been fairly recent that all this has happened, and it's never fluctuated quite as crazily as it has recently. So there's a question of that, but also, as Andrea said, the electricity has to come from somewhere, and same with electric cars. It takes 500,000 pounds of raw earth to get enough minerals for one electric car battery. So that's coming from somewhere, and we can't just, I don't know. I guess I'm curious. I was really bummed that you did vote for that. I don't think it's just not sustainable, the electricity part. And I'm wondering again, I can appreciate the, coming back to this and seeing how it's going to, I guess, play out again, if it pops back up. But what are you looking at overall? Are you thinking about your constituents and how they are going to be able to pay for electric bills to heat their house? I mean, I live in an old house. I do the best I can trying to do all that, fix my new window, get new windows, and that I can't really afford every new window. And I just don't think I don't think people can handle it. And I'm curious what you're going to do if it does come back up, and what kind of research you're going to do. And do you listen to the people who talk to you when they have to pay their bills? And I guess that's my question. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond. I suppose whether people feel heard by me or not is best answered by the people who are talking to me, but I certainly try to make myself available as much as possible and listen really closely. I'm a social worker with 2 young kids. I don't have a lot of money in the bank, and my house is heated by oil. So when I think about these policy changes, they impact my bottom line as well. I think one of the things that comes to mind for me first, just to name what I think Dan has already named, is this is an impossibly difficult policy area to solve. What we know is that the current system is not working. It is not working, certainly for low-income people right now. It's not working for our planet. What we don't know is what the solution is going to be. I think what many people know is that we need to start trying to figure this out from a policy perspective, and doing nothing is certainly not the answer. I think one of the things that is really hard for me is that so often in these conversations, of course, we come back to individual people and individual responsibility. And I think what we're trying to figure out how to do, at least in my mind, when I think about policy approaches like the clean heat standard, is how do we shift this conversation to the broader market? What we need is that people who are profiting off of current outdated methods of energy and heating, we need to figure out mechanisms to reduce that profit. We need to figure out mechanisms that incentivize those industries to move in different directions. We cannot afford as a government to be footing the bill for discovering the new energy of the future. What we need is people with money and power to be investing in those things, because they know that that is potentially where the profit lies. Whether you agree with the capitalistic system or not, that's what we've got. And at the end of the day, we need people who are making money to find different mechanisms of making money. It's very hard for me personally when I hear the rallying cry that if you do this, that the fuel vendors are simply going to pass on the cost. And I think what's frustrating for me is that I think the reason that that's such an effective rallying cry is because we know that it's true. And what's frustrating for me is that the attention gets put on politicians for making the choices that would put fuel vendors in that position, rather than focusing on why has it become so fundamentally understood as a society that that gets passed on? Why is that why is that the bottom line? I think we need to shift our attention away from the individuals who are suffering, not away from the individuals who are suffering, but that it's their responsibility to solve this problem, and keep the focus where it needs to be, which is that there are industries and systems profiting off of a current system that's broken, and we have to figure out policy mechanisms to shift that. Is this the answer? I don't know. To be super frank with you, there's so many things I vote on in the legislature that I have no idea if it's going to be the solution. But what I know is that it feels better on some level than the thing that we're doing right now. I think that the Clean Heat Standard vote, as has been said already, was going to come. It was a plan. It was a vote to make a plan. And that plan was going to come back to the legislature for us to be able to vote on to determine if it's a plan that works for all Vermonters. So it did not pass. This is not going away. I am running for re-election, and I am very available to listen. If you have thoughts about what you think is the best possible solution forward, I would love to hear them, because nobody has this solved. That is my soapbox statement about the Clean Heat Standard.
I would just say the number one issue I heard in the bill, the Clean Heat bill had been through the House and voted through Senate Natural Resources and was well on its way to fully passing without a comeback to the legislature for a vote on the plan that got developed. And I think I played a key role in getting that provision added to the bill. And at that point, you can't, in the process, people lose respect for you if you advocate for changes to make something better and then you don't support it. And I think I played that role, and I think what I did was listen to the people that were testifying and listen to my constituents, and I did the best I could.
So Rich, I think that's really, it's true. You put in all this hard work, and it like you said, it wouldn't look good to not, support the thing that you were advocating for. So I guess just a suggestion as you guys are starting to, look for re-election is maybe just have some conversations about that, because I know that people, do look to see who votes on what, and, just hearing like your explanation, Kate, and really, Rich, I mean, I'm so grateful that you got that amended or, added into the bill, because there does need to be some checks and balances. And, all of this stuff is creating new systems. And that's what we need to do. We know the systems are broken, and there needs to be checks and balances on those systems, and not just have it be like a blanket new thing, because it's a process and we have to learn. And without the feedback and the ability to change and adapt, it's not going to, bring about the desired effect. So I look forward to having more discussions. And I mean, I'm just wondering, like, what if there were, roundtable discussions on, on county levels or whatever it is about, okay, people that don't like the Clean Heat bill, let's brainstorm, like, how can we make this be a better bill, or what would be the features? I mean, have there be some sort of input from both sides, from the people that are for it and also the people that didn't support it, but then why? Because I know for myself, I consider myself a really huge environmental advocate, but I don't support the way the bill was. But I didn't know about the checks and balances being added back in for the legislative oversight. So thank you, Rich.
And that was also part of the bill, was to go out and do the community input, to go out and have these public input sessions around the state as they develop the policy that they would bring back to the legislature. So there was a series of those over 2 years, I believe, before it would come back to us.
Well, I appreciate, thank you for giving me your feedback. I appreciate that and some insight into your thinking.
Yeah, and thank you guys for bringing that.
Yeah, I know you guys have to go and it's Memorial Day weekend. I just wanted to thank you for having these community conversations. And I was wondering if you would be doing it in the fall again when things start back up.
Yeah, so if, we are entering election time. So as we all know, that we do have, Dan and I do have a contested race in the general election. And so we will see. Certainly if we're back, I know Dan and I were having some conversations. I know like in-person meeting is fantastic. And I also have found that these Zoom meetings have allowed for a pretty large access. So we've had like 20 something people at a lot of meetings, and then we've sometimes like 40 to 50 people watch the YouTube videos later. And so I think we're trying to figure out, either way, there's a strong commitment to community meeting. I think we're just trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's accessible, and then also to provide in-person connection. So we're going to sort that out, but certainly interested in continuing it. Personally, it's been super helpful for me just to have opportunity to hear where people are coming from. And I do take that to heart and consider it as I'm, thinking about these policy issues. I mean, that's, I feel like that's my role. Is it's not what Kate thinks. It's like, how do we sort of capture the tone of the community and then bring that forward?
Well, obviously it's an election year, but I do have a space that can hold people. And we have quite a significant group of Lamoille County people that have been meeting on various issues that are near and dear to our heart. And we would be more than happy to host an in-person gathering where you guys could speak to your constituents, and we would make sure that the people that come are just your constituents. So so we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Thank you for offering that. I think we're definitely going to be around all summer and fall. So, but we are around anyway. So it's really no different. We're just, obviously this is just an election year, but always available to talk to people.
I would say that, I've tagged along with Kate and Dan through most of this, but something in December would be a good thing to do pre-legislature.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I wanted to say was yesterday there was a rally at the high school at Lamoille Union, and I didn't know if you guys knew that. There was over 60 kids there, boys and girls, and I don't know, that's not really an appropriate PC thing. Anyways, lots of teens were there, and it was organized by a teen, and they all made signs, and they stood in the field down on Route 15, and they had speeches and things like that. And it was just really inspiring to see our youth in action. It was about reproductive freedom. And so one of the things I was telling my daughter after I picked her up from school was like, oh, did you know there's actually a constitutional amendment in Vermont that would help guarantee reproductive freedom? And they didn't know that. She didn't know that. So I thought, oh man, like that's kind of sad that they don't know like what's going on in our state. So I was just thinking it would be really cool to connect in with maybe some of like the civics teachers or something like that to be able to, give them legislative updates or something. I mean, I said, this is really a big deal if the constitutional amendment goes through, and, just gave her a little bit of information, but that hasn't passed yet, right? That's for this.
It will be on the ballot this fall. And gets to vote on it.
Vermont Proposition 5, our state constitution opens up once every 10 years to be able to amend it. And when a number of states, Louisiana and Texas, and there were a number of states passing bills that limited abortion, our state decided to move ahead with a constitutional amendment that enshrines that. It passed the Senate. The process is has to pass the Senate, because every constitutional amendment has to start in the Senate. It passed the Senate on with a 2/3 vote, and it has to be at least 2/3. Then it went to the House. They voted on it. We had an election 2 years ago. It also passed. It has to pass in a second biennium by a majority vote of both houses, both House and Senate. It did that. So this fall, it requires a majority vote of the people of the state of Vermont. And it's Proposition 5. And what it basically does is enshrines the tenets of Roe v. Wade into the state constitution.
And I just wonder, does that also include health freedom for medical procedures outside of reproductive health. So does that also give people the ability to make decisions on their healthcare choices, you know, in a larger scale?
The language specifically addresses reproductive health. I do want to just, if it's okay, I want to kind of pause here because it's 9:57, and I want to wrap up. But thank you guys very much for being here and for the questions and the comments as always. And we can certainly follow up after this meeting about ongoing conversation. And but I wanted to give Senator Westman and Dan a chance. I don't know if you want to say any parting words before we close out for today.
I want to thank Kate for making sure that we all got the links every time, and I personally didn't have to think about it. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for really organizing this and getting it out on Front Porch Forum. It's been one less thing that I'm thinking about, so thank you for your time on that, for sure.
Freed up time for you to advocate for the child advocate.
He did.
I'll consider that my contribution. Effort. Yeah, thank you all very much. Appreciate it, and yeah, hope to see you all again in this capacity or in person very, very soon.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.